Now remember, dear neophytes, one must always be in control, for it is by control that we truly become our true selves, just as the great angel had dictated. Instructor? Yes, my child? There's a rather angry gentleman over there. He seems somewhat upset. He also seems to be coming right at us. Really fast. Oh, him. Excuse me for one moment.
You will be killed by traitors!
There we are. All better. Are you alright, instructor? Oh, I'm fine, Horace. My name's Jeff, instructor.
Your lies will not save you, little Horace.
You.
Yes?
You saw nothing.
What?
Exactly. Now come, brothers! There are many tiny Horaces for us to slay, and big Horaces, and medium-sized Horaces, and tank-sized Horaces, Horacei of all kind. Death to the traitors!
Salutations Rangers, General Bradley 101 back at you again with some more lore. And in today's video, ladies and gentlemen, we return back to form. I'll explain a little bit at the later end, but don't worry about that. We'd start off with a banger, with none other than the Angels of Blood themselves, the Revenant Legion, Sanguinus' own. Ladies and gentlemen, today we are covering the Blood Angels in all of their most splendid glory. But before we can really get into them, there's one important element that we have to understand, and that is the Roman imprint on the Blood Angels. You see, when people think about Blood Angels, they often think, oh, okay, I guess a little bit of Renaissance here and there, and when people think of Roman, they think of the Ultramarines, but no, that is in fact false accusations, fake news, one might even dare to say. For you see, the Roman element are clearly in the Blood Angels, and I beg to ponder, I produce, that the Blood Angels are the most Roman, and in fact so Roman that they make the Ultramarines look tame by comparison. That is what the crux of this video will be about, and we will be going over and hyperfixating on this very specific, very important point. Well, now that that's over, we move from inside jokes to less inside jokes, but are still kinda inside because we're the Warhammer 40k community, so... patio jokes? Patio jokes, let's go with that. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get cracking on with the history of the Blood Angels. The Blood Angels began as the 9th Legionaries Astartes, as raised by the Emperor from his Proto-Legions, that would eventually come to replace the vaunted Thunder Warrior Legions who the Emperor had retired previously. However, there's little to no mention of the 9th Legion during the Reunification Wars. Now, this is odd as they were confirmed to be one of the most deployed legions. However, unlike the 18th, who would prove to be the downfall of the mutated Caucasus kingdoms by destroying their underground magma generation and rampant thinking machines, or the vaunted 16th Legion, who proved itself adept at crippling strikes and would eventually conquer Luna, all the way up to the vaunted 1st, who proved themselves to be the Space Marines and the most trusted and loyal of the Emperor's sons. The 9th, though, didn't have any of that. Mainly because every single campaign that the 9th partook in wasn't the type of thing that the Emperor wanted to be spread. You see, the 9th were engaged in what was known as destruction or eradication operations. Essentially, these were operations where everything had to be destroyed, from people to buildings and anything in between. When the 9th Legion was deployed, there was no banners, there was no tactics, there was no ceremonies, there was not even any flags. There was just pure and utter annihilation. And thus did the 9th Legion earn its wicked moniker, that being the Eaters of the Dead. For part of the grim reason why there were no remembrances or no recordings of any kind during their operations was because after the Revenant Legion had slaughtered every single one of the inhabitants, they would stalk not only for survivors, but to cannibalize the dead and dying. For early on in their creation process, it was revealed that they had an overactive omeophagia gland, the omeophagia being one of the many Geneseed organs given to the Space Marines by the Adeptus Astartes. This specific organ allowed them to learn the memories and tactics as well as strategies of a defeated opponent simply by eating. Now, in some cases, this would just be a simple, small drop of blood, and that was that. Such was the potent strength of the Omophagia that they barely even needed to ingest any form of matter whatsoever. However, the ninth's Omophage was different. It was ravenous. It compelled the individual Astartes to not only satiate that hunger, but to feast on it fully. Records show Astartes devouring entire corpses, and in some cases several corpses of the dead, not for any wanted information or any type of strategical reason, but merely because the bastards were hungry and the corpses looked bloody tasty. This then compounded further, as the 9th Legion was not composed of your standard Marines. And I'm not talking like the 12th Legion, where it was just butchers and berserkers, or the 8th Legion, which it was literal criminals. I mean that they were not composed of normal humans. For whereas normal Space Marines only recruited from the best select pools, with the 3rd Legion, soon to be the Emperor's Children, recruiting Terran nobility, and then we have the Ultramarines, the 13th Legion known as the Warborn, for they only recruited from the best promising orphans of usually officers. However, the Blood Angels were different, for they took the worst of the worst, the most mutated and lost souls, those which other legions would have deemed fit for only extermination. The 9th Legion would take them gladly. This was because the specific Geneseed of the 9th was so potent and tailored specifically that it worked best with already mutated Geneseed. For such was the mutations that the 9th would impose, far more drastic than even that of the Salamanders or Space Wolves, that having an already mutated host only aided in the transformation rather than hindering it. Thus did the 9th Legion become that. It took monsters, mutated and despondent souls, and turned them into quite literally demigods. Not only in the physical sense, but in appearance as well. For the 9th Legion had the most beautiful Astartes, rivaled only by that of the 3rd. But even then, whereas the 3rd was individualistic and cultured and structured, the 9th Legion was something altogether different. They specifically were all uniformed, various similar heights, various similar eye colors, hair colors, all resplendent in pale skin. They truly did look like they were sculpted out of marble. Of course, due to the nature of this transformation, you can imagine many people did indeed believe them to be demigods, and thus a religion was actually formed where there would be recruiters, quote unquote. Completely unofficial, but they became what is known as the Red Priests, not to be confused with the Red Priests of Mars. They would in essence gather hordes of mutants, and they would eventually follow the 9th wherever they would go as a sort of baggage train, quote unquote. And they would speak about how those who would be proven most worthy amongst them would transcend their corrupted forms and become true angels incarnate. This was, however, until the Emperor became the Mod of Terror, put on his fedora, and then decided that God is indeed cringe, and ordered the cancellation of all forms of religion. The 9th, with complete apathy as well as zero remorse whatsoever, then gunned down the mutant hordes and preachers. And you can imagine what they did in the aftermath. Yet this held a bitter secret, for in truth, when the 9th would take to the field, any sense of beauty and nobility were lost on them, for they became ravenous devourers. But what made them so infamous was the way they devoured. They were not like the 12th Legion, in which they hounded the foe, destroying them, seeking for further and further combat. Nor were they like the 6th, in which their blood was the highest during the rout. Or were they like the 8th, who maniacally laughed, indulging in vindictive glee as they spilled the blood of any. No, the warriors of the 9th Legion, they specifically would advance slowly and in silence. They would rip apart the enemy, literally, but there would be no emotion in their eyes. There would be no contempt, no anger, no bitterness, nothing. Their beauty was dead, in a sense. For as they ripped apart the dead, the dying, they slowly feasted upon them. But it was not the ravenous hunger devouring as a wild animal devours prey. No, it was slow, painfully slow. One would say that they were savoring their food, yet upon their faces there was no expression of glee. It was almost as if they were automatons, doing what their nature bid, and their nature bid them devour everything, even their own brethren. For amongst the many names that the 9th got, one was the Immortal 9th. For many of their commanders and officers seem to have lived far beyond the standard lifespan, some recording to have lived hundreds of years despite any aspect. However, this would prove to be a grim secret, for in fact, when a high-ranking officer of the Ninth would die, their subordinate would eat their corpse, absorbing their memories and their identity. In that way, they technically still lived on in the perpetual death which the entirety of the Ninth seemed to inhabit. One would think that these would be censured. Such vile actions would bring only condemnation. However, not so. The Emperor allowed them. He had shown time and time again that he wasn't afraid to destroy the creation which displeased him. Yet, the Revenant Legion continued. The Emperor had need of them, apparently, and they would serve. However, as the Great Crusade left Terra, the Master of Mankind needed to secure the loyalties of Mars and Luna, as well as the rest of the Sol system. But to do that, he would need to pacify the entirety of the system. And one particular piece of said puzzle that caused him terrible trouble was the Neptunian system. For many lunar arcologies as well as planetoids have been developed around the giant. Yet, these were not important. They held no strategic gains such as the Jupiter rings. Instead, they've served as raiders for evil, malformed mutations. They were one of those problems that you couldn't ignore, yet you didn't want to deal with. Thus, did the Emperor send forth the Ninth Legion. The Ninth Legion was then sent to the Neptunian system, particularly to that of the Key Buron system, where previously 4 full regiments of the Imperial Army's verdant regulars were seemingly swallowed up and disappeared. It was at there that 3 companies would descend upon the system, and there they would find that they indeed still had some remnants of the Verdants, though the planet was covered in mutated forms, led by a great evil warlord known as Eklobai. And in a cruel twist of irony, Eklobai and his warriors used the tribes of men as food, for they had survived long night not by making do, but rather innovating, or should I say, devolving. For it was by their hand that they created tribes of slave races, lesser humans mutated in grotesque ways who would serve as cattle. And so did the warlord maintain his domain. It was under these circumstances that for 3 months, the Imperial Army had repelled these vicious assaults by these mutated hordes of psycho monsters. Yet it was here that the Revenant Legion would then deploy. The Ninth then attacked full force, destroying whatever they could. Seeing this, Eklobai made an oath to destroy the Ninth Legion, and thus did he arrange his full army against them. The Ninth, in their wisdom, decided that the only way to end this was to destroy the enemy commander in one fell swoop. Thus, they made a vicious charge against him, cutting down and breaking any foe, attempting to claim Eklobai's head. Eventually, the Ninth would form a spearhead and drive directly at the foe, and they managed to get close. However, this is when Eklobai pulled his trap card, as he unleashed the true horrors of Old Night. What became known as the Cracked Skulls. These were sorcerous chattel, mutated psycho beasts that were akin to that of mutated chaos spawns, descended upon the Ninth, and they ripped a bloody toll. The Revenant Legion fought bitterly. However, eventually they realized that they were outmatched, and attempted to break out. However, only one of the 3 companies would survive. Thus, did the Revenant Legion, numbering approximately 380 men, decided that they would fight a different war, and that they would destroy the enemy in turn. Thus, for the next several months, they began guerrilla tactics, breaking up into smaller squads and getting the one thing that they needed, and the one thing that Eklobai needed as well, the human chattel tribes. While the Blood Angels would descend upon them, they would gather up all of them, take the strongest and induct them as Astartes, and the weakest they would use as rations. But the Ninth Legion had no qualms engaging in cannibalism, and so did they beat Lobai by his own game. And this vicious war would become known as the Banquet of Ki Burian, and it continued for an unbroken 12 years. The Ninth Legion, piece by bloody piece, rebuilt its numbers and continued destroying Eklobai's food stores as well as his infantry supply. It was during this time that the Blood Angels truly showed their best and worst, for there are very few records of this battle, yet we have some claiming that the inhabitants of the Kirbion system saw them as devils and demons feasting upon their children and turning the rest of them into own even more barbaric demons. We have one tale that says that the end of the 46th Verdian regulars came not at the hands of the foe, but of the Blood Angels devouring the nearly decimated regiment for supplies and for flesh. Ultimately, we don't know. However, in the 12th year, Eklobai was surrounded in his fortress spaceport, and a full 1,000 marines stood against him. At this time, however, when he attempted to unleash his slave-like sorcering mutations, the sheer mass of unarmored initiates wielding barely sharpened blunted objects charged at him, and this time the Blood Angels had the numbers, and Eklobai would be defeated, for he would attempt to flee in a primitive spacecraft. However, it was there that the 7th Legion, the Imperial Fists, would appear, and they would destroy it utterly, securing the planet for compliance. However, the Praetorian of Terror, Rogal Dorn, would see the actions of the 9th and be horrified, as well as wrathful in equal measure, for he deemed them not Astartes, their actions and deeds unacceptable, and he would expunge the record of this campaign from all public affairs and burn the planet utterly before even a single remembrance has set foot upon it. And sadly, that would be the case for all of the endeavors of the nascent 9th. What took place on Kirbion was not a one-time incident. For the entirety of the 9th, a total of 12,000 Marines had been deployed to the Neptunian system, and after 12 long years, many assumed that they were dead. But when they came back, they found that the 9th had completely pacified the system, but moreover than that, there were actually over 12,000 Marines. To many, it had seemed the 9th had not lost a single man, which betrayed the truth, for they had lost several men, but given the mutated population, they just recruited all of them and killed the rest. Effective, yet undoubtedly grim. Wherever they were sent, they were never recorded. No battle honors, no marks, nothing. The only thing that people would look and know upon them was that these wicked creatures, clad in grey armor, interrupted only by the woeful stink and sorrowful eye that could only come from dried human gore and viscera, as well as acid markings. For the Legion made no attempt to show any type of character unless it was marked by acid or painted in blood, and they were known as the Corpse Eaters, the Revenant Legion, the Undead, a foe despised by the Imperium, yet not nearly as much despised as they were by the enemy, and thus did the 9th Legion descend further and further into madness. It will only get worse as their tactics became more and more brutal. They became more and more recluse. They became more and more evil, some whispered, with the rumor being that the only thing keeping them from being disbanded outright was the writ of the Emperor himself, as well as Malkador the Sigillite. However, eventually, like the Thunder Warriors, all knew that their usefulness would run out, and that one day these revenants would be destroyed by the light, that these demons would be put away by an angel. They were right in some cases, for the demons of the 9th would be put away by an angel, but what would rise in their place was truly the noblest of all Marines. And then that brings us into Sanguinus. Sanguinus, like all the Primarchs, got yeeted into space by his mother. Yikes. Look, I wasn't the biggest fan of Erda before this, but I mean, Picky is a shit dad, I'll give you that. Not the best, but I don't think he's that bad that, throwing your children into space hell is better. I mean, yeah, shit dad, shit mom, checks out. Yikes. But for Sanguinus, that means he ended up on a irradiated hellscape covered by nuclear fallout and basically fallout, but worse. Significantly worse. Jesus Christ alive. Oh my lord. Poor Sanguinus. Sanguinus would eventually fall into the world of Baal. Baal used to be a verdant paradise world, used by trade and all sorts of goodness. However, during the Dark Age of Night, it got nuked. Cause Civil War or something, we don't know. But like I said, Fallout but worse. Imagine Fallout but like cross between Skyrim. Fall Sky. No, that didn't make any lick of sense whatsoever. Moving on, it was there that Sanguinus would descend upon one of the moons, Baal Secundus, and then he would be discovered by a tribe simply known as the Blood, because they had pure blood, or pure blood I should say, quote unquote. You see, they were basically human. They still had severe radiation sickness as well as poisoning and mutation, but they at least still resembled humans. The other creatures that stalked the wastelands were definitely not. Upon seeing his white wings, there were many who wanted to kill the infant Primarch. However, upon gazing this beautiful child, in both physical as well as emotional aspect, it was decided that they had no right to slay such an innocent creature, and they took Sanguinus as one of their own, incorporating him into the tribe. Eventually, in 3 years, Sanguinus would grow up, like all Primarchs, to be fully grown and bloody ginormous. It was also at this point that his tribe would be attacked by a group of mutated predators. Sanguinus would slay all of them, approximately 100 if some records are to be believed, with his bare hands, and it was said by those who witnessed it that never before had they seen such a rage induced. For gone were the nobility and beauty of the angel, for he stood over the corpses of the dead, his hands soaked in their mutated blood. Foreshadowing, by the way. It was there that Sanguinus slowly reunited the planet, but not by military conquest nor diplomatic means. He was a Primarch. He was able to create stable shelters and dwellings and ended the semi-nomadic life of his people. He was able to do good things and, well, he was an angel, a demigod. The people of the planet began to worship him as the savior, for, wouldn't you? Being clad in rags upon a wasteland of nuclear fire, or to see a golden angel descend from the heavens and smite down the creatures that would destroy you with a single strike. Sanguinus, whether he wanted to or not, and he most definitely did not want to, became the God King, and all bowed before him and worshipped him. But Sanguinus, in his classic humility, tried his best to belay these, and begrudgingly accepted, and never fully indulged in it, ever, for he was the protector, and he would protect them from all, including the Emperor of Mankind. Sanguinus was one of the most powerful psychic Primarchs, seconded only to Magnus the Red himself, for he had seen the coming of the Emperor, and he knew the Emperor's proclivity for, fedora wearing. So, he decided to meet with the Emperor in secret. He made a promise to the Emperor. He would pledge his undying servitude and valor unto him, so long as he didn't wipe out the population of Baal, and moreover, leave it limited as possible. Now again, we don't know exactly what Sanguinus allowed and disallowed, but I imagine like Vulcan, it would be stuff that would still preserve his homeworld, but make stuff a little bit easier. So, enclosed settlements, always having food and medical supplies available, but not so much so as making it into a full-blown city, rather just giving people a safe place to go to bed. But then again, we don't really know. The Emperor accepted this wholeheartedly, and Sanguinus was inducted as the Primarch of the 9th Legion. However, it would take a while for the Revenant Legion to gather in one place. Thus was he placed under the care of Horus Lupercal to learn the ways of war-making as well as to perfect himself as a general and a soldier. This would be the beginning of the best friendship in all of 40k, for indeed, many would remark that there was no greater friendship than between that of the wolf and the angel. It was upon the Tegar system, more specifically Tegar Pentaurus, or Tegar V, where Sanguinus would first meet his men. The Blood Angels had arranged there, waiting for what was to come, and as the Stormraven gunships descended bearing the insignia of the Lunar Wolves, an honor guard of wolves stepped out. Yet, at their head was not Horus Lupercal, but a resplendent angel clad in gold. It was the Geneside of the Blood Angels, Sanguinus. And upon seeing his men, these brutish murderers and butchers, the undead who feasted upon corpses, Sanguinus did something that no one expected. He bowed to them and kneeled, offering them his service and his loyalty, pledging to them oaths of honor and duty. The 9th Legion were taken aback by this. They, the Revenant Legion, the undead, the corpse eaters, the devourers of flesh, the most hated amongst them, the most forgotten amongst the Space Marines, those who the Imperium would rather throw away if not for their bloody talents. They, hated and despised, desponded by all, they who would rather sooner die than ever experience anything close to honor, an angel, a god, had kneeled before them, giving them his allegiance, with asking for nothing in return. For the first time in their entire existence, the hardened hearts of the 9th Legion broke. Emotion flowed through them for the first time as they felt something. They felt alive. The Legion in its entirety swore to the Primarch immediately. No hesitation, no question, and they would follow his word unto death, up until his sad own death. For it was upon there that the abhuman hordes of the Tegar system would fall before the 9th Legion. Sanguinus himself would partake leading from the front, saving many of the lives of his own sons, and taking a score of the enemy. It was here that he would claim the pelt of the Diacacaradon, aka the giant snow leopard that he wears on his armor, as a trophy of the battle, and as a symbol as the pact that he had formed with his sons. It was also here that we get a glimpse into what the Legion could have been. For here we see that at the end of the battle it was said that Sanguinus had a vision of two futures. One, where he was the leader of a bloodthirsty legion of murderous evildoers, clad in crimson and spilling blood. Blood so great that it would spill over eightfold. But then, he also saw another image of golden angels, clad in crimson. They would stand, and they would be noble, beautiful, and honorable. And upon the end of this vision, Sanguinus was to have declared, even though a darkness hangs over them, a future soaked in blood and horror, they are angels yet, angels of the blood. And thus the 9th Legion, Revenants no longer, but whilst they would still be covered in blood, their angelic nobility would shine forth, and thus the Blood Angels were born. It's important to touch up here that Sanguinius' naming has two meanings. It has the literal meaning in that, yes, they are still bloody melee combatants, but they're angels now. They have some nobility with them, they're not just mindless butchers. It also has another meaning. For those of you who studied history, you will know that nobility generally refers to people of noble birth or noble blood, with some of them going incredibly far, that being the Spanish caballeros, meaning literally born of the blood or of the blood. Thus, Sanguinius saying that they are blood angels, or angels of the blood, he is implying that they are noble just by virtue of existence, that regardless of what they may do, of how much war they may engage in, they are still noble angels. It's a beautiful meaning, and it goes to show the duality of the Blood Angels, and how close they were to becoming either blood or angel. And thus, Sanguinius would begin his reforms. The Blood Angels would continue their campaigns, for Sanguinius understood that his sons needed more than just military reforms, they needed social ones. Thus did Sanguinius pair each and every Blood Angels company, reorganizing them into 200 companies of 300 Marines each, with a single Lunar Wolves company, for them to learn the social as well as martial etiquettes from them, so they would become more than just bloodthirsty melee combatants. And this would later be expanded to all legions that would accept them. Indeed, he would learn forging and crafting from the Salamanders, defense and siege expertise from the Iron Warriors as well as the Imperial Fists, logistics and tactics from the Ultramarines and Dark Angels. And this was possible due to Sanguinius because everybody just loves Sanguinius, man. I mean, look at him! Look at him! How could you not love him? He's fabulous Golden Hawk boy. Look at him. Thus, the Legion was reorganized. For, you see, the Blood Angels before this were a purely melee infantry formation, armed as Reaver squads. Basically, chainsword, pistol. That's it. They had no fancy technology, they had no ranged weapons, they had no armor, they had no advanced anything. They were just giant hordes of melee butchers. Indeed, even their company structure was not companies at all. Astartes would flow in and out of companies as they chose, with the captains being little more than warlords essentially. But the Blood Angels were not held by any form of cohesive military structure or discipline, but rather by the charisma as well as the military might of the particular warlord. If a subordinate challenged the superior captain, he would put him in his place by simply fighting him in a duel. Seeing this, the angel knew that it had its merits, but it also had its significant downsides. So, by going to other legions, they learnt the other various forms of warfare, and to ensure that his legion became a disciplined force, he instituted the spears. There were 3 spheres. The first sphere was that of the line infantry, the various drivers and specialists, everyone who wasn't an officer essentially. In this sphere, they were to pick one discipline, whether it be martial or even philosophical. For the 9th embraced various disciplines that even those of the 13th and 3rd Legion would consider frivolous, such as poetry, prose, sculpting, painting, artistic talents, militaristic talents, anything. They were to dabble in all of these things, but they were to become masters of one thing in particular, with various titles given to those known as virtues and powers. The virtue of the blade, the power of wisdom, etc., so on and so forth. Sanguinius put so much effort into reorganizing his legion so that they felt like they were doing something. So that even merely by learning how to read properly, you became a virtue of knowledge, a power of skill. It gave the Blood Angels not only the discipline that they lacked, but the honor and the glory that had long been robbed of them. We then come to the second sphere, which is purely the officers. Whereas the first sphere was meant to only learn one trait, the officers were meant to master multiple, and become true exemplars of what it meant to be a Blood Angel. This was also where they were taught their specific combat doctrines, as well as tactics and military structure to even further enhance them. And then finally, we have the First Circle. The First Circle is the Inner Circle. It is home to the specialist formations of the Blood Angels, which we'll touch on a little later. But this is Sanguinius' personal guard, his personal circle, those most closest to him. But in truth, Sanguinius loved all of his sons, and he changed them. For the Astartes at the beginning of the Great Crusade, compared to that of the end, are night and day. For gone were the Revenant Ninth. In their place were the Angels of Blood, noble, honorable. Whereas once the normal citizenry of the Imperium did not know them, and the military cadre would gawk and balk at them, now they were vaunted as the best, true exemplars of the noble Space Marine. So much so that it was said that if Horus Lupercal had not been there, it would be Sanguinius that would have been made War Master. Horus himself echoed this sentiment, for he has said to lamented to his mourner Val that Sanguinius was a better man than he, and that Sanguinius would be a better War Master than him as well. Sanguinius, however, in his grace and in his mercy, beloved by all, he continued to improve upon his legion, for his angels truly now were that, angels. And finally, the grace and the beauty that they possessed now matched their character in equal measure. However, like all good things, there must be an end. And the end of the Blood Angels, and more specifically that of Sanguinius, would come by the machinations of his most closest brother. During the heresy, Horus himself knew more than anyone the sheer military might that the Blood Angels had. The Blood Angels were the best assault infantry, period. Whereas the Space Wolves claimed to be good melee line infantry, when it came to fast-moving, hard-hitting melee infantry, the Blood Angels were the greatest of them, descending from orbital drop shock assaults that would rend the foe, and they would rend the foe bloody. Horus knew that Sanguinius would never turn to chaos. He was too loyal for that. Too noble. However, Horus had a trump card. Many years earlier, when he and Sanguinius were operating in the same theatre, he had come across a scene which had confused him greatly. He had saw Sanguinius murder one of his own sons. However, Sanguinius would later explain that his son had become lost to the Red Thirst. The Red Thirst, collectively known as the Flaw, was the first step of the genetic degradation of a Space Marine of the Blood Angels. Their omophagia gland would take over, and they would become ravenous. They would seek only blood, only to kill and to consume. Now this is not the Black Rage yet, but we'll get to that in a bit. When this happened, they were beyond saving, and Sanguinius had taken upon himself to put them out of their misery personally. Indeed, such was the guilt that he felt over this, because in his eyes, his Blood Angels were victims of his tainted blood. Horus, when he was still pure and noble, vowed not to breathe a word about this to anyone living, and he kept his promise, until, however, he was no longer Horus of old. And thus did Horus Lupercal decide that upon the Cygnus cluster, there the 7 worlds and 15 moons were to be cleansed of the Xenos invaders known as the Nephilim by the Blood Angels. And Horus promised that if Sanguinius followed the instructions thereof, his sons would be free from this vicious curse. Sanguinius believed him. What reason did he have not to? And it was upon arrival in system that the fleet was ambushed. Demonic forces of the warp, led by the daemon known as Chris, sent an image of himself to Sanguinius, declaring lordship over the system in the name of Slanesh. The Blood Angels, still ignorant, prepared a counterattack, for they would not stop. Sanguinius still believed his brother, and he wished for his children's salvation. However, Sanguinius would come face to face with something altogether different. Kabanda, a greater demon of Khorne. During the vicious melee that ensued, Sanguinius would become severely wounded and pass out. Not before, however, that he would witness his sons, full 500 of them, being slaughtered in one blow by the mighty axe of the Khornic demon. Such a psychic backlash inhibited that the Primarch himself was sent into shock. And his sons, however, they were consumed by something altogether more evil. A rage, not a blood rage that was common of the Red Thirst, but a dark rage. An evil rage, a black rage took over them. This is recorded to be the first time that the Black Rage was said to have shown itself. And it aided the Space Marines, for they managed to fight off the demons until the Librarius of the Blood Angels could revive their Primarch. It was then that he assaulted Kabanda with a fury unbound and defeated the Bloodthirst in single combat. It was then before that the mighty Slaneshi demon known as Chris was also banished back into the Immaterium by Sanguinius himself. It was only after the entirety of the demonic corruption was cleansed that the Black Rage finally subsided. It was after this battle that Sanguinus would realize that something was amiss, for as he began to inquire, he realized that the Imperium was in fact in civil war. He ordered his remaining fleet, as well as his remaining astropaths, to find safety back to Terra to find out exactly what was going on. However, Terra was hidden from them, and they would eventually find, however, the 500 worlds, guided by the Pharaoh's beacon. It was there that they would meet with the 13th Legion Ultramarines as the 1st Legion Dark Angels, and together, believing that all was lost, they would establish Imperium Secundus. And there would be many adventures, including Kurz playing Among Us on the Lion ship, and Vulcan becoming a very, very, very burnt piece of coal, before, eventually, they would realize that through a premonition of Kurz, the Emperor was in fact still alive. Thus did the three legions attempt to make for Terra. However, only Sanguinus was allowed to slip through, as the Lion and Gilman held off enemy forces and allowed a brief passage through the ruined storm for the Blood Angels to slip. They would be the only legion to make it time into Terra, and during the Siege of Terra would be the greatest and final stand of the Blood Angels. To say that the Battle of Terra was devastating is an understatement. The Blood Angels, Imperial Fists, and White Scars defended the Imperial Palace, Sanguinus himself being in charge of the outer walls, Rogel Dawn holding the inner walls, and the White Scars being a mobile assault force, counter-attacking and deterring breaches. It is said that 3 times the War Master's troops gained foothold on the walls, and 3 times the Angel would throw them back. However, eventually the wall was broken from Chaos Titans. Sanguinus then ordered a retreat into the inner palace. It was then that he alone would hold Eternity Gate by himself, buying time for the rest of the Loyalist army to refortify themselves in the inner palace. It was there that Sanguinus would fight and slay hundreds of demons, of Chaos Marines, of champions uncounted, those possessed by demonic entities and those empowered by the Chaos Gods. None could stand before the great angel. Even a mighty warlord titan was nothing before him, as Sanguinus took down the mighty god machine with his ferocious might. Finally, however, the greater demon known as Kabanda would fight Sanguinus, and it was during this bout that the angel proved himself true, for whilst he was indeed an angel of the blood, Kabanda did not fight an angel that day, for he would prove himself, for he would prove to all witnessing that while they thought an angel and a demon fought, they were mistaken. Kabanda, the demon of Khorne, fought not the noble angel in which he thought, but he behold, a fellow demon of blood, and Sanguinus would prove to be the greater demon.
Your precious legion will be destroyed, Sanguinus. You cannot stop it. Even now your chosen are caught in the depths of a killing rage that they cannot escape. It is too late. The poison is in them. You know it as well as I.
Perhaps, Sanguinus hissed, but they will not fall today. I will not permit it. This ends now, demon.
With a wordless shout, the angel twisted his arms, his hands tearing at the axe head, and like a sickening crack of a snapping spine, so too was Kabanda's weapon shattered. The angel grabbed one of the bloodthirster's curved horns, and using all his might, brought his fist to meet the beast's snout, and landed a fury of blows that brought Kabanda low, spitting out gobs of black blood and broken teeth. The demon growled.
Look at you now! Where is the noble angel, Abhuman? Better the sweet blood to smother you!
Only angels may fly,
he said darkly, tearing out the black paean. The angel then dragged the spitting, wounded fiend to the lip of the pit, and then lifted it up so he could look in its twisted eyes.
I will take your skull yet!
If you truly hail from the realm that men once called Hell, when you return there, tell your kindred it was Sanguinus who threw you back.
It was there that the Horus made his final gamble. With the Ultramarines, Space Wolves, and Dark Angels closing in, he dropped the shields upon the Vengeful Spirit and goaded the Emperor into assaulting. The Emperor, along with his custodies, the Imperial Fist, as well as Sanguinus and his sanguinary guard, all but one, save for Ascalon, was sent aboard the Vengeful Spirit via teleportation to attempt to end the rebellion with the death of the War Master. However, this would be a machination. Whether by the will of chaos or by the sheer unreliability of teleportation, Sanguinus would be teleported away from the Emperor, and he would find himself in the throne room of the would-be War Master. It is there Sanguinus would fight against him. However, Sanguinus, tired after unyielding days of battle, after having slayed countless great champions, a greater demon and a warlord titan, holding Eternity Gate by himself, compared to the fresh War Master, imbued by all the power of Chaos Undivided. Sanguinus was no match, but the Primarch proved his mettle by putting up enough of a fight to have his golden spear implanted into the side of Lupercal, leaving enough of a chink in his armor that the Emperor would eventually use to destroy him outright. However, even in his death, Sanguinus would suffer for his loyalty, for so enraged by the War Master, by the sheer loyalty of Sanguinus, that he killed Sanguinus in a manner that would have reverberations across the years. For he unleashed a vicious psychic assault upon him. So vicious was it that the entirety of his bloodline would be affected by it. Whether this was a mutation of the already suffered chaotic wound on the Battle of Cygnus, or a lost bit of malice from the God of Chaos, we do not know. What we do know is that when Sanguinus died, every Blood Angel in existence upon Terra and across the galaxy flew into the Black Rage. And with bare hands and gnashing teeth did they rip apart Space Marine as well as Demon alike, for none was safe from the wrath. For gone were the angels now, because gone was the angel, and all that remained was blood. And thus did the Blood Angels' tale end for the heresy. After this, the Blood Angels were shattered, to say the least. Like the Iron Hands before them, the loss of their Primarch was something they could barely bear. Had it been not for the teachings and the instilling of virtues and nobility of Sanguinus himself, they may have well reverted back to their old ways. But they saw within them the nobility of the angel that lived on. For while Sanguinus may have died, his blood still lived on through them, and they would honor their Primarch by living the life that he could not. They readily accepted the Codex Astartes because they had no issue, they had no choice, and they had no desire for war. They were broken up into several different chapters, with notably Ascalon taking over the original Blood Angels. So that's their history up until the Horus Heresy. And as for the history afterwards, the Blood Angels are a fan favorite chapter. Thus they've been involved in nearly almost every single major engagement. The Several Wars for Armageddon, the 13th Black Crusade, anything really that was big, the Blood Angels had been involved. However, their most notable campaign was that could have the potential to be their last, that being the devastation of Baal. In the year 998 M41, a tendril of High Fleet Leviathan was on a direct course for Baal, the homeworld of the Blood Angels. It was there that Lord Commander set out a call for every single Space Marine chapter that had the blood of Sanguinius in them. The so-called Sanguinary Brotherhood, he called it. Now, this is not something that unique. Many chapters affiliated with the various Primarch have something similar, the most famous being the Last Wall Protocol by the Imperial Fists. It was upon the shield worlds of Cryptus that the Blood Angels would make their stand. For arrayed together was every single son of Sanguinius, with the exception of the Lamenters, who at this point were pretty much still nearly destroyed-ish, kinda, the lore gets a little weird, but every single son of Sanguinius stood. For Dante had recollected that not since the stand of the Eternity Gate had every single son of Sanguinius been together, but thus did they stand, and thus did they fight. Against wave after wave of the Tyranid scum did they hold off against, regardless of whatever foul mutations that the Tyranids descended upon them, they would hold. Regardless of where the calls came, from Armageddon and from Cadia, the Blood Angels, however, sent elements of their forces to both campaigns, for they were the Blood Angels. They could not deny someone in need, and they would fight for every last bit of ground that was theirs. Fighting everywhere, across all campaigns, the Blood Angels proved themselves time and time again. Eventually, however, the shield worlds of the Cryptus system was sacrificed. In doing so, however, the earliest advance of the Tyranid Hive Fleet was shattered. However, that means that the planet of Baal itself would come under direct attack from Hive Fleet Leviathan. Lord Commander Dante bolstered the forces as best he could. However, he leaned into the strengths of the Blood Angels, using preventive hit-and-run attacks, using the sheer savage butchery and immense speed that they were known for to bloody the foe before they got into combat. The Hive Fleet, however, would learn, and it would send wave after wave using a different strategy countering the previous tactic, taking its toll even further upon the beleaguered defenders. However, They would drive off a full 19 waves, but at a great cost. 5 chapter masses in total fell in the bitter fighting. It was there, however, that during the 20th wave, the Blood Angels seemed spent. All remaining forces of the Sanguinary Brotherhood were drawing together in a valiant last defense of the sprawling fortress monastery. There they prepared to die, but they would die as sons of Sanguinus, and they would die together. It was at this critical point that the Great Rift cracked open, for the fall of Cadia to the 13th Black Crusade had occurred. This proved to be a blessing, as the vast etheric storms covered the area around Baal, and due to its own psychic emanations, it prevented the Tyranids from launching another wave. This would be cold comfort, however, as on Baal itself there were already enough Tyranids to destroy the Imperial forces there several times over. However, Commander Dante still led his troops, fighting hopelessly unto hope, wishing, praying, doing God knows what. The only thing he could do was fight. However, as the final perimeter was broken, the storm ceased and the stars reappeared. Looking up to the sky, Commander Dante expected to see his doom. However, what he instead saw was his salvation. For like an angel of vengeance, Robute Guilliman descended, and upon him did he not only bring his wrath, but also reinforcements. Angels, clad in crimson, and in various other chapter donations, descended from the Zux Meritor, the Admech Arc Transport, of Belisarius Call. The Primaris Marines had been delivered, and Lord Commander Dante was named Imperial Regent of the Imperial Nihilus, and was set forth to reconquer the stars, and to aid Robute Guilliman in restoring the Imperium. And thus were the Blood Angels reintroduced and reinforced with the new Primaris Marines. And the Blood Angels have continued ever since then, reconquering the rest of the Baal system, as well as driving back the traitorous forces that would dare to encroach upon Imperial space. The Blood Angels stand upon the precipice of a new age, but the old blood still runs true in them. Unto what they will do, unto how they will do it, who can say? But what is known is that so long as the noble blood of Sanguinius runs through the Blood Angels, they will continue to conduct their lives in the manner which their Primarch had wished for them. For they are angels, angels of the blood. And thus the history of the Angels of Blood has continued. But how they made that history was done through Bolter and Blade. We start off first with the old Revenant 9th Legion. As mentioned before, they don't have any structure whatsoever, with massive swirling companies of primarily infantry being led by a captain, but even that is very generous. These were warlords, individually able to command only by mere strength of arms and their personality or charisma. The 9th as a whole was armed as Reaver squads, that being close quarters combat melee infantry, but they possessed no advanced technology or anything. They were simply just a massive ceramite armed with chainsaws and bolt pistols, and that was it. They would rove as marauding bands, cleansing and killing any in their path. Discipline was virtually non-existent, with the only thing causing any issues whatsoever was that if the captain, or warlord, took offense to one of his soldiers, or vice versa, which was usually settled by a duel, which ended in blood. The coming of Sanguinius changed all this, however. He then reorganized the bloated companies into 200 new companies of 300 marines each. Eventually, at the end of the heresy, this would be reworked into 300 companies of 500 marines each. And as mentioned, he introduced the Orders of the Spheres, with each sphere helping train the battle brother in question to become more refined and less bloodthirsty. In addition to this, Sanguinius, realizing the state of his legion, he then created the idea of the hosts. The hosts were not an official formation, for there were no chapters or no grand battalions. Instead, several Blood Angel companies would be grouped together under a host, with the most senior officer being in charge as a host lord, known as the Crimson Lord. This was a far more flexible formation, and indeed it harkened back unto the Legion of old, yet like all reforms the Primarch implemented, much more refined and far less carnivorous. He also reinstated into the Blood Angels much needed technology. Whereas before there had been masses of infantry charging at the foe, they had always shown a panache for a drop pod assault, but it was under Sanguinius that this became true doctrine, for all of their vehicles would be outfitted for high speeds and every infantryman being outfitted for close quarters combat, being deployed via a drop pod and equipped with a jump pack. Whereas the gear of the old 9th was barely anything other than crude, the arms and armor wrought by Sanguinius' sons were very well maintained. Mastercrafted power swords, mastercrafted chain swords as well, and in addition to the regular bolt pistol, specialist kinds of pistols such as plasma pistols, but more specifically hand flamers as well as inferno pistols were said to be favorites amongst the ranks of Sanguinius. Whilst the Legion did lack heavy-duty armor and static defenses, it did not have them completely unavailable. Moreover, it was the case of if push came to shove in a war of attrition, these assets would prove untenable. However, it was always thought that another legion more suited to defense would cover these aspects. For the Angels of Blood were not meant to be the anvil, but the righteous hammer descending from on high. For the combat doctrine was based around quick, hard-moving, hard-hitting infantry, carried by land speeders and drop pods, speeder bikes, jet bikes, and all manners of fast attack craft. The Blood Angels would hit you up close and personal, and they would rend the foe asunder. No one could stand against them. This was due to two parts. One, the nature of the Blood Angels and them being heavily melee oriented, but two, they studied under one of the best melee legions and who used similar tactics, that being the Lunar Wolves, for several decades. This then further compounded between the two and gave the Blood Angels a nasty bite. As previously mentioned as well, Sanguinius decided to instill in his sons a sense of nobility. For example, rather than the title of Praetor, they had the title of ArchAngels. In addition, if you had a company over a command, you were not a captain, but rather you were a dominion. For junior officers, as I mentioned before, they were known as powers, those who commanded the ranks of the company. And then there were the virtues, those who were exemplars in other endeavors, aka champions. This then led to the Blood Angels not only acting noble, but truly believing, for everything about them was to be noble and excellent, even from their titles and names. Now, we've discussed the previous spheres, but let's get into the nitty-gritty of the first sphere, that being the Inner Circle. Now, these were made up of a total of 5 separate warrior orders. These were the closest and most personal to Sanguinius, those who he trusted with his most deadly and most difficult tasks. The first and the most well-known are the Sanguinary Guard, or the Isat, the Burning Ones. These were the elite personal honor guard of the angel, and thus they bore the title of Seraph. These were the bodyguards of Sanguinius. They were meant quite clearly to go where the Primarch goes, to intercede blows in his behalf, as well as to carry out his will. Sanguinius often used them in some cases as diplomats if he ever needed them, but they were trained to excel in every martial aspect, and like all the honor guards of legions, they represented the best virtues of each legion, clad in master-crafted gold artificer armor, wielding winged jump packs, as well as in carmine blades and axes and wrist-mounted bolters. These would follow the Primarch wherever he went, and formed a very bloody tip to the deadly spear that was the Blood Angels. We then have the Crimson Paladins, known as the Krvim, or the Stormwinds. Whereas the Sanguinary Guard could be said to be the hammer of Sanguinius, the Crimson Paladins were the anvil. They mainly served as the guardians of the Primarch's halls, other legion facilities, and any form of emplacement that Sanguinius had deemed vital. For if the Blood Angels made any outpost whatsoever, it was these gentlemen who would guard it, especially the outposts on Ball, Canopus, and Scythe. However, there would always be at least a company of them, which accompanied the angel, should he ever need elite shock troops. For these were clad in master-crafted cataphracti terminator plate, and they were armed for close quarters melee combat, wielding power swords, dew lightning claws, power axes, power mauls, thunder hammers, and storm shields, all master-crafted, and all extremely deadly. They were the angel's bastion, wherever he needed them to be. We then have the Burning Eyes, known as the Ophium, or the Many-Eyed. These were also known as the Angel Shame. These were essentially Sanguinius' secret police or his shadow agents. The Red Thirst was something that would come and go. It was something that the Sanguinius was able to nullify to a degree, but never entirely. Thus, it would be the duty of the Burning Eyes to watch for the signs of treachery and madness that usually came with thirsting and hungering for blood. Armed with special power swords that were able to nullify psychic fields as well as deliver crippling blows, they would be the ones to seek out these wayward brethren and end them. Needless to say, they did not have a glorious reputation and were very ill-omened, but as always, they were a necessary part, though Sanguinius himself felt shame, not only in the acts they committed, but rather that he had to give his sons a task that would require them to be in shadows. And then finally, we have the 2 destroyer cadres, the first being the Angel's Tears, that being known as the Broken Blade or the Dead Hands. Each individual warrior bore the title of heirloom, and they were Sanguinius' wrath set manifest. Sanguinius, like other Primarchs such as Vulcan and Rebute Guilliman, despised Destroyer Carters for the unnecessary damage that they would cause. Thus, whenever they were deployed, they were only deployed under the most dire of circumstances, and only when the Angel's wrath had truly been deserved. And even then, the Angel urged them to carry out their duties in reserved nature. For whilst they were clad in master-wrought armor, and whilst they bore weapons of mass destruction, to show that they were indeed sorrowful, thus did they don on silver death masks, for they would mourn the death of the world which they would inflict. Where the Angels too, however, were somewhat reserved, and indeed performed this task as a necessity evil. The High Host was something completely different. Known as the Archae or the Principati, they were a fraternity of the Blood Angels that specialized as well in Destroyer Cadres. However, unlike the Angels' tiers, which did it in a manner of being forced to, or rather in an unfortunate manner, the High Host was only delivered unto those who had earned the righteous retribution of Sanguinius. Thus did they take to their task with not necessarily glee, but with righteous vengeance, with true anger and rage in their hearts. For whoever had deemed the ire of the High Host had made a slight against not only the Legion itself, but Sanguinius, and thus they were deployed only to destroy humanity's darkest nightmare, or when they went to war, they left a trail of murdered worlds in their wake. At the beginning of the heresy, it was estimated that the Blood Angels had a nominal strength of 150,000 Marines. In actuality, they had approximately 120,000 Marines, counting various garrisons as well as combat losses. By the end of the Great War, however, they would be left with approximately only 5,000. Again, side note, don't really know if that's like an actual thing because it's like, yikes, that's a lot of motherfuckers dead. I don't think that's the case because like, I mean, going from like several 100,000 to like just a few, that's rough. That's really fucking rough. But that aside, they would be divided into 5 different chapters. That being the Blood Angels themselves, the Flesh Terrors, the Angels Vermilion, the Angels in Carmine, and the Angels Sanguine. What is noted about the Blood Angels in particular is that surprising, they actually maintain quite a high number of heavy armor. They possess an unusual number of Land Raiders, as well as Dreadnoughts. As to why there's so many Dreadnoughts, we'll touch upon that when we get to the chapter in Geneseed. The Angels of Blood have always maintained close ties with Mechanicus, with while the world of Baal itself being maintained completely untouched as Sanguinius wished, the other worlds of Baal Secundus and Baal Primus were then ravaged by Mechanicus, and essentially became miniature forge worlds that pumped out equipment specifically for the Blood Angels alone. So, to go over chapter organization, as of the 42nd millennium, we have as follows. We have the chapter command, led by Lord Commander Dante, Lord of the Angelic Host and Imperial Regent of the Imperium Nihilus. We then have the Sanguinary Guard, led by Brother DAEMONS, known as the Exalted Herald of Sanguinius. He has at his command 25 Sanguinary Guards, as well as the chapter Serfs, Inquiries, and other helpers. We then have the Armory. The Armory, led by Brother Incario, known as the Master of the Blade, the head Tech Priest, which has in its 39 Tech Marines, 87 Servitors, 29 Predators, 21 Baal Predators, 10 Vindicators, 10 Whirlwinds, 12 Hunters, 9 Stalkers, 39 Land Raiders, 25 Propulsors, and 47 Storm Raven gunships. We then have the Reclusium, led by Ashtaroth the Grim, the Redeemer of the Lost and High Chaplain of the Blood Angels, with his 15 chaplains. We then have the Sanguinary Priesthood, which is led by Brother Corbulo, Sanguinary High Priest, as well as the Keeper of the Red Grail, with his 26 Sanguinary Priests. We then have the Librarius. The Librarius with Mephistum, Master Librarian and Chief Librarian of the Blood Angels. He then has with him 8 Espitolaris, 13 Codices, 12 Lexicanums, 14 Acalatum, and 9 Furioso Librarian Dreadnoughts. We then have the Fleet Command, led by Brother Amandeo, the Keeper of the Heaven's Gate. He has at his hand 5 strike cruisers, 2 battle barges, 13 escort vessels, 28 Thunderhawk gunships, and 6 Thunderhawk transports. Then finally, we have the Logistician, led by Brother Galamantius, the Warden of the Gates, who has at his command 489 chapter inquiries, serfs, and servitors. So, we have the first company, the veteran company known as the ArchAngels. It is led by Captain Arinos, who has the title of the Shield of Baal. It has 2 lieutenants and 100 veterans, including Terminators, Blade Guard, Stern Guard, and Vanguard veterans, as well as 10 Furioso Dreadnoughts. We then have the second company, known as the Bloodied, led by Captain Donatus Aphael, the Master of the Watch. with his 2 lieutenants, 6 battle line squads, close support squads, 2 fire squads, and 5 dreadnoughts. The battle line squads being anything from tactical marines to intercessors, incursors, or heavy intercessors, anything of the sort. Close support squads being either the close assault marines or the assault intercessors, and fire support squads being any number of devastators or any form of eradicators or tailblasters, etc. We then have the 3rd company, that being the Iron Helms, led by Captain Adantiago, Master of Sacrifice, again with the same complement as previously listed. We then have the 4th company, the Knights of Baal, led by Captain Raphael, known as the Lord Adjucator, with again the same complement previously listed, except only 3 dreadnoughts instead of the classic 5. We then have the Daemon's Bane, the 5th company, led by Captain Sendeni, the Keeper of the Arsenal, with again the previously established units. We then have the 6th company, that being the Eternals. This is led by Captain Tybalt, the Caller of Fires, and he has at his support 2 lieutenants, 10 battle line squads, and 6 dreadnoughts. We then have the 7th company, the Unconquerables, led by Captain Phaeton, known as the Master of the Marches. At his side are 2 lieutenants, 10 battle line squads, and 4 dreadnoughts. We then have the 8th company, the Bloodblades, led by Captain Montaro, the Lord of Skyfall, with 2 lieutenants and 10 close support squads and 2 dreadnoughts. We have the 9th company, the Sunderers. They are led by Captain Lartanis, Master of Sieges, and they have 2 lieutenants, 10 fire support squads, and 5 dreadnoughts. And then we have the Redeemers, the Scout Company, led by Captain Borgio, Master of Recruits, with 2 lieutenants, as well as scout squads and 10 Vanguard Space Marine squads, in addition to 457 unassigned neophytes. And then finally, of course, we have the Death Company, led by Chaplain Lamatis, the Warden of the Lost. What's important to note here is that, like in the Great Crusade, the Blood Angels still maintain quite a durable fleet, for indeed they had one of the largest in the Great Crusade, numbering approximately 600 capital ships and 300 escort vessels. Even after the heresy, they still maintained one of the greatest fleets amongst the chapters. But what I want to really get into here is that, as we see with the latest indulgement, particularly in that of the Scout Company, that's 500 neophytes, which is a lot more than what you're normally supposed to have. And one thing that we're going to see is the idea of the chapter being changed far more than we've ever seen before. With Gilman himself revising the Codex Astartes, I imagine that the idea of a legion coming back is a very good prospect, especially with the line up and kicking about. So, what we need to now talk about is the Death Company. The Death Company is where you put Marines who have succumbed to the Black Rage. But to really talk about the Death Company, we gotta talk about the Black Rage. And to talk about that, we gotta talk about their chapter, culture, and Geneseed. So, how does one become a Blood Angel? Well, it's simultaneously easier and significantly harder than most other chapters. So, what happens is what's known as the Time of Challenged, where all hopeful aspirants of the Blood Angels make their way to Angel's Fall, that being the location of where Sanguinus landed upon Baal. Also, the place that a mighty statue of the Primarch now stands, reminding those all of where they have come from and where they are going. Just getting to the damn place is a challenge enough itself, as you gotta make the vicious journey across the relatively safe settlements to this big chunky bastard in the middle of God Almighty knows where. Crossing radiated-filled deserts, surviving attacks by vicious predators, as well as leaping from high cliffs with only using a crude hang glider to cross the gap. Upon arrival, gladiatorial contests will be held. There's approximately 50 places held every time. So basically you have a fight, top 50 get in, the rest, they either have 2 things: becoming permanent residents of Angel's Fall, where they become the guardians and incorporated into local PDF, a place of honor rather than shame, or they may travel back to their own tribes and continue their lives. It is at this point that when an aspirant wishes to become a Blood Angel, he must first drink from the Red Grail. It is after this that they will soon be entombed within a coffin, hooked up to life support systems where they will be pumped with a mixture of various chemicals, but more importantly, a vial taken from Sanguinius' own blood himself. It is then that the aspirant will spend a full year locked in here, and he needs to survive with having both physical as well as psychotraumatic, some of them including visions of Sanguinius, horrorful nightmares or beautiful dreams. It's all different. Many do not survive this, but for those who do, whereas they entered the tomb, horridly disfigured and mutated, they exit angels, carved out of marble, but decked in pale beauty. It is from there that they are directly inducted into the Neophyte, and then into the Scout Company. For whilst they still need to prove themselves to be a full battle brother, surviving this trial alone is enough to promote them to the hallowed rank of Scout. So how do the Blood Angels see themselves? They see themselves as noble. They have a duty, an honor, not only to themselves and the Imperium, but to their dead father. they also see themselves as cursed. However, they see it as something that they must overcome, and treat it as such. This is not to say that they don't hate it, they definitely do, but they don't let it become a stain upon them. For they had seen where that leads, and it is nowhere that a son of Sanguinus wishes to tread. Thus do they endeavour themselves to enjoy the time that they have. They still continue the ways of the spheres, with each Blood Angel being bedecked in all manners of art and culture, philosophy, oratory, prose, sculpting, painting. They truly are noble warriors, akin to that of true knights, one might even say. For whilst they practice the blade in equal measure and are furious beyond any comprehension, the way they speak, the way they act, towards people, towards their own brothers and cousins, it is something that is incredibly heartwarming. And time again, Blood Angels have often been chosen as diplomats as well as negotiators, for many see them as true, honest and noble. But now, let's explain the Red Thirst and the Black Rage. The Red Thirst was always present. As mentioned before, it was a direct result of the overactive homeophagia gland. It gave them a thirst for blood, Red Thirst, and this resulted in them eventually cannibalizing the dead, hence how they got the term the Revenant Legion. But that was it. If someone were to fall to the Red Thirst, they would fall into a blood fury which they could not wake from, which resulted in them needing to be slain. However, during the Battle of Cygnus, something happened to Sanguinus. The psychic assault left a wound on him, and it was the first time that they had entered the Black Rage. Whether this would continue to evolve into what we know today, no one can say. But what we know for certain is that when Sanguinus died, the psychic attack and the psychic backlash, combined with all the deep power that the Primarch had within him, as well as the deep love he had for his sons and the connection he felt, meant that every single Blood Angel inherited the scar of his father. Whilst it begins with the Red Thirst nowadays, eventually, if the Blood Angel gives into it in question, it won't be a lust for blood that he feels. Rather, he will be engulfed as he was Sanguinus, made to witness his final death again and again, and then be stranded upon the Siege of Terror, with only traitors there. And thus does the Blood Angel, once noble, now encompassed in blackest of rage, set forth into the foe, to rip and to tear, to slay the traitor, to bring death unto Horus. Which is why many Death Company yell about traitors and Horus even when they are fighting Xenos such as the Tau or the Eldar. When this happens, during a battle they will be grouped up into the chapter's 11th company, that being the Death Company. They are led into battle by chaplains, for the chaplains are the only ones who can seem to direct them in any sense, able to tap into their ability to produce righteous fury against the foes of the Emperor. But moreover, because the chaplains represent the direct authority of the Emperor, so the Death Company still see them, whereas in all other cases they only see Horus and the wicked treachery he had unfolded upon them and their father. The Death Company are given the pick of the chapter's armory, usually melee weapons, and they are sent forth into battle, and they are meant to die in this fight. For, if they manage to survive, Asrath the Grim, the High Chaplain, will take it upon himself to slay them with his red axe. However, if for whatever reason they survive or they are unable to be taken into battle, it is upon the Tower of Amael, upon Baal itself, that they are locked and entombed, to rage and to scream, to howl and to curse. For the rest of eternity, the once noble angels of blood, now clothed in the blackest of rage, or in shadow do they now lay. Every single son of Sanguinus, every single chapter has a Death Company. The Primaris, which were initially believed to be free from the Black Rage if not the Red Thirst, were proven to be not as resolute, for they too would fall into the darkest of rages and be grouped up in the Death Company. And nothing has changed. Even internment into a dreadnought does not save a Blood Angel from this fate. For many a time has a Blood Angel gone mad in the dreadnought, and then is sent against the foe. However, usually, to honor the venerable battle brother, they will not be killed after this. Rather, they're able to be put in hibernation and launched at the foe, hoping to die in combat. For killing a brother is one thing, but to kill a venerable ancient, or the curse of living, is something that very few could stomach. Even the noble sons of the Blood Angels. In addition to the Death Company, the Blood Angels have very powerful librarians. One of the three original legions, along with the White Scars and Thousand Sons, that founded the Librarius, Sanguinus himself was a potent psyker, and his sons inherited that same psychic ability, with them being able to adapt many psychic disciplines not just their own, including geomancy, the manipulation of earth, technomancy, the manipulation of machines, and hemomancy, the manipulation of blood. Now, this varies from the Sanguine Sword, which encapsulates the Librarian's sword in crimson blood, making it incredibly potent against armor, to the Soul Shackle, where powerful chains of crimson blood will wrap around a creature and hold not only its physical form, but even its very spirit still, waiting for the judgment of the Sons of Sanguinius. And, of course, the most notable, the Wings of Sanguinius, where the Librarian will sprout a pair of blood-red crimson wings to bear him aloft as his Primarch once did. Blood Angels Librarians are incredibly potent. Again, top 3 best in all the Space Marines. And, unlike other chapters, they have access to Librarian Dreadnoughts. You see, Magnus way back when made a device that allowed Librarians to channel their psychic powers through the Dreadnoughts. The Blood Angels were the only ones who accepted it, even though he offered it to all the legions. As to why, don't really know. Some people just hated it, some people didn't see the need for it, and others thought that it was just a bit much. Sanguinius, though, he liked it, so he yoinked it, and thus did his sons continue to use it, which is why the Blood Angels are the only Loyalist Legion that are able to produce Librarian Dreadnoughts. These Librarian Dreadnoughts will often replace one of their power claws with a Force Sword, or a Force Lance, or a Force Blade, aka Giant Stabby Psychic Sword. Indeed, they're able to cast their magical abilities as well as use their massive Dreadnought bulk in equal measure. It has not impeded them in any way, shape, or form. The Blood Angels also have a unique type of Dreadnought, known as the Furioso Dreadnought. The Furioso Dreadnought, both in the Boxnaught and Contemptor versions, is a Dreadnought that has double power claws, and is able to rip and tear, and in addition to that, it has jump packs.
Excuse me, what?
Yes, so when you fight a Blood Angels Dreadnought, you have 2 options. The Dreadnought sprouting blood wings charging at you, or the Dreadnought charging at you with a giant fucking Dreadnought-sized jump pack. Either way, you are fucked. Do not fight Blood Angels in melee, do not fight Blood Angels, period. You will get fucked, and not in the good way, in the very bad way. Unless you have a kink for vampires and BDSM, in that case, more power to you. So that brings me to the question, why do the Blood Angels have so many bloody Dreadnoughts? Quite simply, Blood Angels are the oldest Space Marines. The nature of the Blood Angel Geneseed is to take someone that is already mutated and corrupted and extend their lifespan, to physically change them. And yes, while all Geneseed does indeed change the aspirant to a Space Marine, the Blood Angels does it far more vicious and far more permanent, which is why they have such a high fatality rate. Indeed, Blood Angels have some of the lowest acceptance rates. They're up there with the Space Wolves in regards to their Geneseed. But the trade-off is well worth it. For whereas those who go in were once mutated and scarred, do they exit tall, uniform angels? In addition to this, their lifespan is far significant, with it quite common for many Astartes reaching near 1,000 years old, with the current oldest living Space Marine Lord Commander Dante being well over 1,100 years old and not showing any sign of aging whatsoever. Due to this, and the resilience of their nature, it is far more easy and far more likely for Blood Angels to have candidates worthy of being a Dreadnought, nor able to be turned into a Dreadnought, hence why they have so many bloody Dreadnoughts. Also, melee Dreadnought. Very good. So, there are countless notable characters of the Blood Angels, but I will be going over just a few, the most important in my opinion. The first being Lucius Dante, the Lord of the Angelic Host, Lord Commander of the Blood Angels, and the current Imperial Regent of the Imperium Nihilus. Lord Commander Dante is one of the most greatest Space Marines to ever have lived. As mentioned, he is one of the oldest Chapter Masters period. He is truly said to be the most truest son of Sanguinius, wielding a master-crafted power axe, artificer armor, jump pack, and inferno pistol. He has lived for well over 1,000 years, and the legends abound him continue, for how he slew enemy champions here, for how he destroyed massive constructs there. All of them seem true, yet to the old Chapter Master, he grows tired of them. In truth, Chapter Master Dante is tired. He has lived and seen many evils in his time, and all he truly wishes, if his close most inner circle is to be believed, is to simply perish. The only thing keeping him from doing this, however, is his duty to his Primarch and his people. For whilst he may tire, he is a Blood Angel, and his duty is above all. And while those may consider him to be less than what he is, or an old man tired of war, the scrolls of Sanguinius speak that a golden armored warrior will stand defiant in the Emperor's throne room when the end draws nigh. It is believed that many believe him, Commander Dante, to be this figure. Dante himself too believes it. But one thing is for certain, Whether he is just an old warrior tired of war, or the destined savior at the end of days, Lord Commander Dante stands, clad in his golden gilded armor, bearing the face of Sanguinus himself. For as long as he lives, he will fight. And as long as he fights, the Blood Angels will not fall. We then have Mephiston, the master of the libraries. Mephiston was originally known as Battle Brother Calatrus. He was a librarian, and a very good one at that, being potent in his psychic potential, yet excelling as all other things as a Blood Angel should. However, it was when he was fighting in Hades' Hive during the Second War of Armageddon that the Black Rage took over him, and he was inducted into the Death Company. Calatrus took part in the final assault on the Ecclesiorium building, and he was actually one of the many people crushed under the falling debris when said building collapsed. He was buried under that rubble for 7 days and 7 nights. During this time, the Black Rage came upon him, and it came upon him with a vengeance. Though he had no outlet by which to express it, he could not move. So Mephiston fought. He fought, and he fought, and he fought. And despite all, his will remained strong, unusually strong. And it is said that a vision of Sanguinus himself touched him, and gave him the strength he needed to overcome the Black Rage not once, but twice, being one of the very few Adeptus Astartes Blood Angels to do so. This then, however, leads further credence that the Black Rage is not a physical mutation of the Geneseed, but rather a psychic wound inflicted upon the Blood Angels. Thus was he granted the title of the Lord of Death, for whereas others would enter the Death Company by the heirs of the Black Rage, Mephiston denied said request, and he proved himself Lord and Master of Death. Very interesting character to me, because if you read about other stories of the Blood Angels, such as the Knights of Blood, or one chapter like that, there is this Blood Angels chapter where they are said to have made a deal with the Tzeentchian demon, and they are no Black Rage or Red Thirst, but should one brother fall to it, the entire chapter falls to Tzeentch. This then leads more credence that the psychic wound is indeed that, a psychic wound, and that the Blood Angels, whereas they look for a physical solution to the Red Thirst, are looking in the wrong place. But then again, who can say? We then have Astorath the Grim. Astorath the Grim is the High Chaplain, also known as the Redeemer of the Lost. Essentially, he is the High Chaplain of the Blood Angels, and as I mentioned before, it is his job to deliver those brothers who survive the final assault of the Death Company the final gift of the Emperor's peace. Indeed, the duty hangs heavily upon Astorath. He is said to operate with a cold determination, yet also a solemn to him. It is one of the most honored positions, for the battle brother in question must give up everything to see that his brothers may find peace. Yet it's also one of the most disliked and dishonored, for your blood is permanently stained with the blood of your brothers. Something in a fraternity like the Blood Angels, which their father Sanguinus preached heavily for, is frowned upon most indeed. But all honor Astorath none the same, for he is indeed the Redeemer of the Lost, even though he himself may never have the redemption he delivers unto his brothers. We then have Chaplain Lamates. Lamates is the Warden of the Death Company, and its ultimate commander. Lamates is interesting, for while he himself is afflicted by the Black Rage, driven into battle, he survived, but he was not the frothing marauder. Indeed, he was then placed into stasis to return to Baal for further inspection, and when he awoke, it was shown that while he was still clearly affected by the Black Rage, he was not overcome by it. Instead, he wished to continue to lead his brothers into the charge once again, and thus was he given the title of Guardian of the Lost. It is said that he is one of the few chaplains who can cut through the voice and give direct orders. Due to this, and ever since his induction, the Death Company has become more of an actual company force than rather just rampaging berserkers. Indeed, Lamates is able to direct him to strategical points, granted that nothing as the Blood Angels are used to, but considering the other alternative of just pointing them in direction, at least Lamates allows the Death Company to turn. For while he himself is lost, he takes up with his brothers and stands defiantly, for he is their guardian, he is their warden. For he too is lost, but he will keep his brothers on the same path. We then have Brother Corbulo. Brother Corbulo is known as the High Sanguinary Priest. He also has the title of the Bearer of the Red Grail. As I mentioned before, the Red Grail is essentially a grail of blood that is collected from all the Sanguinary Priests, which themselves had their own blood injected with Sanguinus, thus becoming a devout carrier of the Blood Angels' lost legacy. Moreover, the Sanguinary Priesthood is different. Amongst each and every chapter, there are sanguinary priests, but they all report directly to the sanguinary priest of the Blood Angels, Corbulo himself being the high priest of all these separate priesthoods. The idea of blood is very important to the Blood Angels, surprising absolutely no one. And if you were surprised, goodness gracious my dear fellow, what's the matter with you? It is said that every sanguinary priest is said to bear a resemblance of Sanguinius. This is due to them having their blood directly in his veins. However, Corbulo is said to bear a resemblance most uncanny. He continues to work hard in an attempt to seek to rid the Blood Angels of the floor, working with other chapters and scouring devoutly. For whilst he inducts new aspirants directly himself into the chapter, he always does it with a somewhat heavy heart. For, like Sanguinius himself, he feels that it is his duty to rid them of the floor, and he will not stop until his brothers are free to live the life that Sanguinius would have wished for them, for the life that Sanguinius had lived. However, what will come of this? Who knows? But the High Priest of the Blood Angels continues to administer his duties most thoroughly. For the Blood Angels are made by blood, and by Corbulo's hand will they be kept by it as well. And then finally, ladies and gentlemen, we have the Sanguinor. Now what in the dibbly damnit is a goddamn Sanguinor? Well, truth be told, we don't really know. There's one thing that we do know for certain about the Sanguinor, and that he is a warp entity. Essentially, whenever any Blood Angels chapter is said to have come under grave duress, when there seems that they are going to be destroyed, defeated, broken by the foe, the Sanguinor will appear, descending upon righteous golden wings, wielding his encarmine blade, and cut through the foe as if they were wheat for a scythe. Nothing could stand against him. Some believe that this is the angelic side of Sanguinius personified. Some believe it is a manifestation of the Blood Angels' desire to see their Primarch. We don't really know. What we do know, however, is that this psychic entity always stands defiant, always wins, and always comes to the Blood Angels when they are most needed, and always leaves right after, not saying a word, not speaking, not uttering. However, the promise is that the Sanguinor will always arrive whenever he is needed. So long as the Angels of Blood stand, so too will the Sanguinor stand with them. Not to mention, you can see the Sanguinor's impact. Beautifully sculpted, crafted in immaculate armor, very Renaissance, if I do say so myself. The Blood Angels take a lot of reference from Renaissance-era Italy. It's a common misconception that they take it from Rome because of the musculata that they wear, but the Italians really like the Romans, hence that little bit I jammed out in the beginning. They very much are the tragic angel. Take a look at Renaissance-era paintings. You see the angel standing there, in his grace and in his beauty, yet often in tragedy, or beholding a tragic scene. The themes of tragedy were very poignant during that time, and the Blood Angels, they claim that perfectly. They are tragic angels, tragic figures, yet they are still noble and good, despite all the evil that befalls them. A very poignant and very central theme of the Renaissance, and it's captured very well by the Blood Angels themselves. The Blood Angels are a group of people who value refinement, and initially this was to prevent them from delving into butchery and barbarism, but eventually over the years it's become ingrained in them. Some of the detractors would argue that's only because they wish to become closer to their father, but is that a true detraction? Or do you not also think of the fun things you do with your loved ones before they had passed? Does it make you a barbarian for wanting to reclaim that when you are lost to seek upon the face of your father? I say no. And in my mind, the Blood Angels are a very unique chapter. But to properly get into that, I gotta talk about their legacy. So, the Blood Angels. The children of Sanguinius. Look, I like memes as much as the next guy. Memes are great. But memes have a problem of telling you a joke. Now what is a joke? A joke is usually an over-exaggeration of one particular character, and we find it funny because of how ludicrous it is. People take a look at Sanguinius and they see Pretty Hawkboy. And yes, he is indeed our fabulous golden Hawkboy. But that's all that they see. You often hear the meme, Sanguinius was perfect because he had to die. All of these memes have a grain of truth in them, but that's all that it is. A single grain. Nothing more, and certainly nothing less. In this case, Sanguinius is an angel and a demon. Most people tend to forget that when the great dragon fell from the heavens, he swiped a third of the stars with him, and they fell onto the earth, where they sought to devour her, ready to give birth to the newborn. Demons were once angels, and angels can indeed become demons. Sanguinius was an angel and a demon. People don't understand about Sanguinius nor the Blood Angels, but they are noble, they are beautiful, yes, but they are also ravenous, carnivorous. They are murderers, devourers, evil creatures who can descend upon you and tear your life apart, so much so that you would wish that you had never even been born. People don't understand that about Sanguinus. They don't understand that about the Blood Angels. They are the definition of the duality of man. Sanguinus saw a vision where he became that demon, and where his sons followed him, and he rejected it. He rejected it outright. People often look at Curse and Sanguinus and draw comparisons between them, which is true, there are indeed parallels, but the one thing that made Curse different from Sanguinus was that Curse saw his end. He saw the evil, and he believed it. He wanted it to be so. He wanted to be proven right. Sanguinus wanted to be right. He wanted to be good, he wanted to be just. He chose what was good for him and his brothers and his sons over what he himself personally felt. He knew that when he boarded the vengeful Swill it would be his last, but he also knew that his sons would survive, the Emperor would win if he did it, and he gave up his own life so that he may save others. Sanguinus is a demon, but he chose to be an angel. Every day he chose to be an angel. He chose to be good. He chose to be righteous. He chose to be what he wanted to be. He didn't give in to his bloodlust or his temptation. He didn't give in to the peer pressure, to nihilism, to any form of degradation that would purvey him. He chose instead to be a good person. He indulged in arts, in philosophy, in writing, in literature, in culture, poetry, the greatest things that humanity had before them. And he denied his base instincts. And his example brought a legion of murderers, of revenants, of zombies eating the flesh of the dead, to the most noble angels of the Imperium. They went from being despised to lauded, from hated to loved, from evil to good, from loathed to dignified. All because they made a choice. Before that, no one had ever given them a choice. Everyone had just assumed that they were evil, that they were carnivorous, that was their end, that was their lot. That's it. Sanguinus knelt before them, and he gave them a choice to accept his fealty or deny it. And they chose to be angels, rather than demons. And that's what people don't understand about the Blood Angels. Till this day, they still make that choice to be good, to be angels rather than demons. When you ask someone a question, why do you love a chapter, why is it your favorite? The answer that you will always get is because they are me. You connect with that specific chapter on an emotional level. Someone likes Angron and the World Eaters. Why? They themselves feel like they have been butchered time and time again, that they've always gotten the rough end of stuff, that no one ever cared about them, and that all they ever were was their physical butchery, and they felt like they too had nails shoved in their head. Why does someone identify with the Emperor's children? Because they too wish to be perfect, they wish to be good, they wish to be honest and noble, yet every time they fail, they feel like killing themselves. They feel like ending it all. They feel like they are nothing. They are pushed further and further and further away into debauchery and debaseness just to make up for the fact that they are not perfect. Why does someone love the salamanders? Because you yourself feel the connection and that kinship. You have a desire to be good. You have a desire to do good. You love your family. You fight not because you want to. You don't seek glory. You don't seek accolades. You fight because you must protect those around you, those who would die if you do not do anything. You take up the jobs that other people balk at because you know it must be done, and if no one does it, then you lose, and your family dies, and to you that is something that you cannot stand for, something that you will not stand for. You choose to fight for your loved ones, for in the end, your glory, your honor, it is not that one on the battlefield, but it is the smile and warmth you get when you come to your hearth and home. So too do people choose the Blood Angels, for they feel themselves on a knife's edge between angel and demon. They feel that they have a rage in them, the terrible secret, a terrible darkness that seeks to devour them, and every day they must wake up and they must choose to be the angel, because they have become the demon before, and it terrified them. So they keep that rage, they keep that blood, they keep that hatred, but they do not ignore it. They accept it, They acknowledge it, but they focus their lives on good tasks, on meaningful works, on producing themselves the most excellent and virtuous that humanity has to show. They chose the angel every day, and they deny the demon his feed. That is what it is to be a blood angel, to be an angel of the blood of nobility and the blood of damnation, the blood of a demon and the blood of an angel, the blood of chaos and the blood of order, for they have the blood of both in them, and yet they choose to be angels, regardless of what blood they have. So too does Sanguinus chose to be an angel, and I believe that Sanguinus is looking down upon his sons and he smiles, for every son of Sanguinus, from the Lamenters to the Flesh Terrors to the Blood Angels themselves, they are noble in their own right. They are noble men, noble Marines, for they are of the blood. And how can one be of the blood and not be noble? Also, if you like the Night Lords, you're just a fucking edgy cringe lord. Get bodied, Chris. Bulgaria will be conquered. So, that has been the Blood Angels. Giant, big, fucking heckin' chonka of an episode back, but we're back, baby. Hey there, how you doing? I was gone for a bit. I was up without power for about a week. Yeah. It turns out there was a cable fault and motherfuckers decided to go on strike because Lamau, nothing else fucking better to do. Then my ass was stuck without power for a week, and then I ended up talking to Dutch, and Dutch was like, hey, you kinda need to like step up, you're getting bigger now, so be better. And I was like, okay. So then I became better. You'll notice brand new channel banner, brand new thumbnails, brand new titles, brand new Bradley. Hello there, how you doing, darlings? I am very excited to be back. But yes, brand new, all the nonsense, put some time, put some effort, brand new style of video, brand new everything, brand new, baby. And it all comes at zero charge to your beautiful face, cause goddammit, I love you just the same. But to all those who stayed there during my little hiatus, thank you so much. I appreciate it from the very bottom of my heart. And as you can tell by the channel banner, not just 40k anymore. Battletech, Lord of the Rings coming up as well, maybe even some Star Wars here and there. Any other thing really, maybe some Halo. People like Halo, lots of 40k guys like Halo. I'll get Pancreas to do Halo, very good. But drop down in the comments below, what new thing do you want to see? We will be covering 40k, don't you worry, I promise we will, but a whole big bunch of other stuff coming soon. So, thank you very much for watching. Make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, do all that wonderful YouTube stuff, and if you really like the video, then you can drop your boy a little donation, a super thanks, and thank you, my brother. I appreciate you sincerely. Join the Discord, it is bumping, baby. And I just want to say sincerely, I love you, and thank you just for watching, because remember, you don't have to do anything. Just put my video on, put on some earphones, paint some minis, do some chores, and that's all that matters. You just doing that means the world to me, and goddammit, if I ever see you IRL, I will buy you a coffee and give you a big old kiss. Yes, sir, I will. Mwah! But I have been General Bradley 101. You've been beautiful, awesome, and amazing people. Thank you all so very much for watching, and I will catch y'all next time. Dismiss, Rangers. See one more motherfucking meme about Sanguinus getting pegged. No, just fucking no. Don't, like, seriously, 2-hour fucking long video about, hey, he's not a fucking pretty boy, he's a demon. Fuck you, fuck your bullshit, alright? I'm fucking upset about this, goddammit. Also, Fem Sanguinus is kinda like really comforting in a way. I don't know how to feel about that, but okay, right, goodbye.